Hello everybody, this is Dave Wallace and welcome to my video today. I have a few announcements to make before we get into our story for the day, and that announcement has to do with my book, The Journey of Our Souls. I made the final approvals on the templates that will be sent to the printers, and it's in the hands of my printers right now and placed on production. So the printing of the book should take place sometime this week, and hopefully by next week we'll be having our hard copies. These copies are hardcover books, not softcover, so they're very quality books that will be made available on my website, thejourneyofursouls.com. It'll also be available on my Intuitive Insights Hawaii.com, as well as my pages on Facebook. Okay, so I have a lot of different ways to, if you're interested to get a copy, you can have it there. I am also making an e-book available of the same book, and it's going to be available at the same time when the book is released. So, good news. Okay, and for those of you who've been patiently waiting, thank you for waiting for the books. Okay, last week I shared with you a story of my experience as a security guard at the Hawaii Temple. And that story I shared with Glenn Grant, and Glenn had it published in one of his books, the Obake Tales. And the specific one is the cover with the geisha on the cover. So that particular story is in there. And his version is slightly different, as storytellers do. Okay? And at this time, I'd like to share with you a story that occurred to me as a teacher. And this was kind of like my second teaching assignment, where I was hired at Kailua Intermediate as a social studies teacher. And my classroom at Kailua Intermediate was on a second floor on a wing right behind the cafeteria. So, and my classroom was right at the corner of the hallway, and you had steps going up and down there. So that's where my classroom was. During my teaching, my early phases of teaching, when I would get paid, a lot of times I'd get my paycheck and I take it up to my classroom and put it in my drawer, and sometimes I forget about it. Yeah, and a lot of times I would accumulate one, two, sometimes up to four paychecks inside inside my drawer. And if you have four paychecks, that means for 2 months pay you have locked up in your desk. So my wife at that time wasn't too happy with that habit. So on this particular day, it was the 31st of October and 1991, and it was a Thursday, and it was Halloween. So after getting off work, somewhere in my mind, I knew I was supposed to take all my checks home. But I got carried away talking a story, I guess, and I lost track of things, and I went home, leaving all my checks inside my room. And by the time I got home and started cooking, and my wife arrived at home, as soon as she stepped into our home, that's when I remembered, oh no, the checks. So sure enough, as soon as she stepped in, she asked me, Dave, did you get the check? And I, like a puppy dog, and no, I didn't. And so she got pretty upset at me and says, well, we're going to go there and get it now. And so after we ate, we jumped into the car and we drove from town over the Pali. And by the time we got into Kailua, it was already dark. Fortunately, as I started driving to the campus, Kailua Intermediate campus, I noticed that the park lights that was on the north side of the campus, the park lights were on. something was happening at the community center, and there was a ball game going on, and all of the lights from these activities illuminated the whole campus. So I didn't have to walk around with my with my flashlight in a dark on a dark campus. So one way of getting up to my classroom is that there's a tall, long stairway, that metal stairway that could access my wing, that was outside of the classroom and along the road that went into Kailua Intermediate. So I drove my car down the road and parked my car right at the base of the steps, got out and walked up the steps, and I unlocked the gate. And as soon as I stepped inside the gate onto the walkway heading towards my class, my feet suddenly felt like it was glued to the cement. I couldn't move it. And as I tried to move, something like a voice came into my head and told me, "No, go home." And I was stuck. I couldn't move forward. I could back up easily, but as soon as I take one step forward, that's it. I couldn't take any more steps forward. And so I am over there looking down at the classroom. My classroom is right down there, and my checks are right there in that room. And, I'm forced, I'm in a dilemma. My wife waiting in a car wants my checks. The voice in my head saying, "No, go home." And so I'm caught. So I'm struggling with this, trying to decide, what to do. And as I'm deciding what to do, I look down the hallway and I notice something really unusual. And I see at the top of my doors, the louvers were open. Now, normally we shut our louvers, especially at the end of the day, because Kailua Intermediate School had a lot of pigeons. And if you don't close the louvers, the pigeons going to go inside and make house. So you don't want to be caught in that and get, pigeons all over the next day that you come to work. So, but my louvers were open, and I remembered that I had closed them. So I stood there looking, and as I started looking at the louvers, I noticed these vapors, kind of like smoke, coming out of my classroom. And as a former fireman, I'm looking and I said, "Oh no, there's a fire." But the way these vapors and smoke was coming out of my classroom, I knew it was in a fire, because a fire, the smoke would come out and rise. This one, the vapors are coming out and sinking, going down towards the ground. Very unusual. And the longer I stood there and watched, the more vapors started coming out, pouring out. And as I started to focus what was happening below the vapors, I could see that the vapors were taking shape and form. And the shape and form that it was taking was that of a little girl. A little girl with long white hair and looked like clothes that was breezy, caught in a breeze, flowing. Now, as soon as I saw that and I recognized what was happening, it didn't take another voice to tell me to get going. So I turned around and I walked out of the place. I closed the gate, locked the gate, and ran down the stairs to the car where my wife was waiting at the time. And she looked at me, "You got the check?" I said, "No." And she looked at me, "Why? You were up there for quite some time. Why didn't you get your check?" And so I kind of turned my head towards her, and she knew I was kind of like spooked in a way. And I just told her, Hawaiian stuff. And that's all I had to say. And she looked at me, she go, "Ooh," like she understood. And so we decided to leave. And since the following day was Friday and I was gonna go work anyway, I figured I would pick up my check, and I promised her that I would get the check and take it home that day. So we went home, and I was thinking a lot about what was happening and wondering what was going on with this little girl outside of my classroom. So the next day I went back to work, and to my surprise, um, as I walked to my classroom, there were two girls sitting outside my classroom waiting for me. And as soon as they saw me, they come up to me and said, Mister, there's something weird happened. And so they started telling me a story that they were part of a band that was playing music at the center, uh, at the rec center on Halloween night. And after they got through playing music at the rec center, they came back to the band room and put their instruments away, and they decided to wait for their parents. But one of the girls' mom that's supposed to pick her up was late, so they decided to to play around at the school, and they started, chasing each other as kids would do, and then finally they ended up on the ground floor outside of my classroom, and they started telling ghost stories. And they started screaming and hollering, and all of a sudden they heard someone give a loud shh. And so they stopped and looked around, and they thought it was one of their classmates. Sounded like a boy, so they started calling out all of the names of the people in the band, and nobody responded. So they decided to go and check out the source of this person that's shushing them. So they decided to climb up towards my room, and they showed me how they did it, and they looked like mountain goats, just hopping a couple of hops up the steps and through the gates they went, and it was amazing. So they got outside of my classroom, and one of the girls said as soon as she came up to the classroom, she saw a little girl dressed in white. And so she was curious what was this little girl doing up near my classroom. So she approached this little girl and asked her who she was, and there was no response. But when she asked the little girl, "What are you doing here?" the little girl says, "I'm looking for my mommy. I'm looking for my mommy." And so the student says, "Well, where's your mommy?" And the little girl pointed to the back of the school, to the empty field that we have. And she said, "She's over there." So both of the girls went to the rails to look in the back, and there was no one there. So they came back to the little girl, and said, come with us. Let's go find your mommy." And one of the girls reached her hands out to take this little girl by the hand, and the little girl reached out to grab the hand, and they felt nothing. And both of my students screamed, realizing they're dealing with a ghost, a little girl that was a ghost. So they ran down the steps and started hollering, and they ran all the way to the big banyan tree where they were supposed to waiting. And in a few minutes after that experience, the parent came and picked them up. Now, after that incident on Halloween, I continued working there for another 2 years, and every once in a while, I would feel the presence of someone in my classroom. And when I closed and focused on this presence, it would be that of a little girl. And sometimes dressed in all white, sometimes a little darker, but in all cases, it would be that of a little girl, lonely and missing her mom. And I tried helping her many times to, find the light and join her mom, but her presence in my room continued as long as I was there. So this is Dave Wallace, and if you enjoyed my story, please share it with other people and subscribe. And until next time, aloha.